Hi, I'm Dr. Emily Hecker, and we are going to discuss methylation and digestion, optimizing MTHFR one bite at a time. This is where I start with my patients. Who am I? That might be your first question. I'm a functional medicine doctor. I'm a chiropractic physician trained at Logan College of Chiropractic who has a passion about MTHFR, about many different things, autoimmune, about ketogenic eating, about dietary choices, inflammatory foods. I am passionate about all of this. I'm a wife and I have a dear husband, and I'm a mom of two boys. These are my boys. This is Leo and Max, and this is them just a few weeks ago. They got into my closet. And this is what happens when two boys who get into mom's closet. I heard them clunking around the house in my heels. So it makes me laugh when I see that. This is what I do. I do this for them. I do this for my family because I'm passionate about helping people get healthier and understanding what we should do to get healthier. Now, this image is, I like to keep up with the research, what's going on with MTHFR, and the leader in this research is Dr. Ben Lynch, a naturopathic doctor out of Washington. He has put on with much success 3 beautiful conferences from 2015, 16, and 17. I attended all of them and listened to amazing speakers with this, but I like to stay up to date with this because it's important. We got to keep up with the research. Dr. Lynch has recently launched a new book called Dirty Genes, and he really focuses on 7 of those genes. And he also has a fantastic gene decoder called Strategene, where basically you upload your 23andMe data into this report system, and it pumps out about 17 pages worth of information that's clinically relevant, because so many of those things out there, the genes, there's just not a lot of research on them. So he also has a Seeking Health supplement company, but you know what? This man, he could have just promoted all of this stuff in his book, but he doesn't. He really talks about how you're not doomed with these genes and that you can clean up those dirty genes if you are born with them, because we can't change those genes. We can only make them optimize and work a little bit better with our environmental surroundings and what we put in our bodies and what the air that we breathe in. So this is called the epigenetic expression, everything around us that impacts how those genes function. So some people may need much more individualized care, with this presentation. So just keep aware of that this is not a replacement for your doctor. You want to make sure you're working with a healthcare practitioner to optimize your health, and you will learn. So I like to have 4 key digestive strategies you're going to take away from this presentation today. And really, we're going to optimize the function of that gene. We're going to go into some of these genes. You might recognize these names here, MTR, all these other ones down here. We're going to go through these just slightly through this presentation on digestion. And I like to start here because this is the big picture. This is Dr. Lynch's pathway planner from Seeking Health Institute. He's always updating these. There's new ones constantly being put out. There's one behind me. If you can see back there, I keep it on my wall. I draw on it. You can see my words, because we try to bring in the actual components of life into biochemistry. And that's what this is. This is biochemistry. So I like to start with the big picture, and then we're going to zoom out. We're going to zoom in on some of these things. But when you're looking at this, we start at the top. We start at right here at the reduced folates and the folic acid at the top. We have to go through and think of all of these little blue circles as factories. They're genes. Genes make enzymes, and you have to go through each one of them to get to the next step to move on forward. So we have to follow, kind of like connect the dots, go through each one of these factories, each one of these genes. We get to the one at the very bottom, MTHFR, and then we have to move up through that other methionine cycle right up through there. And then we have to go down through homocysteine to the transsulfuration cycle until we detox. So this is going on all the time, especially in our liver, but in all of our cells. So what is MTHFR? Many people have heard of this, or they're hearing of it and they don't know what it is fully. And I'll be honest, it's a complicated process, but we can make it simple. MTHFR stands for methylene tetrahydrofolate reductase. It's converting those leafy greens into a usable chemical called folate. When we think of folate, think of foliage, right? Outside, we got the leafy greens. We're watering our plants. That's our foliage, which turns into folate, which is super essential for the function, the development of a baby, of methylation, which is something that we're getting into next. What is methylation, right? You might hear this too. Methylation, it's a chemical reaction. It's occurring in every cell in the body, and it's super crucial for all of these different things, especially DNA repair. If you're pregnant and you got baby just growing inside, you're having constant cell reproduction, and we need methylation support to make new cells. So think anti-aging. We need to preserve our tissue. Even our digestive tract, we get a new digestive lining of our gut every 7 days. So we are really relying on this process, this methylation process, to really enhance the function of our cells. The majority of this occurs in our liver. And that's why I like to focus on the digestion as that first piece when we're working with MTHFR. So environmental factors can change it over time. They can change that methylation process over time. And this is the epigenetics component to it. So like, even if you were born with an MTHFR homozygous or heterozygous SNP or polymorphism, meaning that gene can't work to its full potential that maybe some other people's can, we can optimize that. We can kind of scrub it up and clean it up and make it a little bit better functioning for you. But I want you to leave with this notion that you have the ability to control how your genes behave by what you're doing on the epigenetic aspect of it, what you can doing with what you're putting in your body, the foods that you're choosing, the thoughts that you're putting in your brain, the environment that you're surrounding yourself around, the lack of vacations that you may go on, or the vacations that you do go on. So all these things impact how our genes are going to be able to function. All those little blue circles are those factories that we want to process through and get to that methylation. This is an interesting paper that I found showing that DNA methylation patterns can change over time. So if you can see the twin A and twin B, these rectangles over here, there's a 3-year-old, they're looking at two twins, a 3-year-old, two twins, and then 50 years old, they're looking at them. And you can see that just based on the DNA sequencing that they have, initially when they were young at 3, they're very similar in where those black lines were at. But over 47 years, over that time, different things can impact how that DNA methylation can change. You can see it looks like two totally different people in that 50-year-old box looking at twin A and twin B. So this is just a beautiful visual example of how environment can really change the way that we methylate. And this is what you can help control, is we want to optimize your methylation, that function of that gene, of that, especially of the MTHFR. So how do you improve methylation? Any ideas? We're going to get into the digestion. That's why we're here today. So we're going to go into 4 major components of some physiology, bringing in that methylation component. Now there's more to this, but I want to keep it simple so we can hit the main areas, intertwining digestion with methylation and bringing back those pieces so we can see where it fits. So we're going to start with the stomach. Right here, the stomach is that first line of defense. After it goes through that esophagus, you're going to chew your food, which stimulates hydrochloric acid production, which we'll go into here in just a second. But it takes about 1 second for that liquid. If you're drinking that water, it takes 1 second for it to go down and hit into the stomach. Food, solid foods, it's going to be a little bit longer, but hey, 48 seconds, just keeping in mind, wow, this stuff happens pretty fast within our body, and it's going to stay in your stomach, the food, for about 2 to 4 hours. It's going to do some magic work there. So this is an image of all the different secretions of the stomach. So we can see there's many cells, lots of cells in that stomach function. And the 2 at the top that we see is the parietal cell. It pumps out HCl and intrinsic factor that I've circled in the red. There's also chief cells, which pump out pepsinogen. At the bottom, in the antrum, in the bottom half of that stomach, you have some more cells that pump out other secretions, but we're going to focus on the parietal cell and a little bit on the chief cell today, because this really impacts how that methylation piece is happening. So here we go. Here's the stomach function. You can see the parietal cell, and it is located in a gastric gland of the gastric pit. So this little bitty cell is going to pump out hydrochloric acid, and we need that acid. Many times we think, whoa, too much acid is bad. And we need to erase that thinking and think of physiologically, how does the acid function in our gut? And we're getting into that here. So it's stimulated by one of three ways: the production of hydrochloric acid. And it's definitely related to histamine. It can be related to parasympathetic control and gastrin receptors as well. But really what we want to do is we want this cell to be working good, right? We want this cell to be pumping out and working good. Now there's actually three main functions of hydrochloric acid. And this is one of them. And this is how it's kind of like a domino effect. So hydrochloric acid partially denatures or unfolds the proteins that are in food, and it stimulates. It just kind of like a little phone. It says, hey, pancreas and gallbladder, go ahead and release your juices. It's time. So it's going to give it a message downstream. Okay, time to do your work. So think of it as a domino effect. It's getting ready for that next effect. The next function of hydrochloric acid is it's going to help with that protein breakdown. Now think about that chicken that you may eat, or any other type of protein that you're consuming, plant-based, animal-based, whatnot. We need a combined effect with pepsinogen secreted from that chief cell. When it comes in contact with the hydrochloric acid, it turns into pepsin, and bam, it just goes into scissor mode, and it starts chopping up those peptide bonds, breaking down those protein that you eat. So we need the acid to break down food that we consume. And many times, if we don't have enough acid in our stomachs, then do you think you're going to break up that protein? Probably not. And that's what a lot of people have this issue with. Now, another really important function of hydrochloric acid is it is a pathogen removal. Now, pathogen is a critter. It's a bug. It can be anything from bacteria, fungus, parasites, protozoa, stuff that shouldn't be there. It kills. So just if you're thinking of food poisoning, it's going to we need that acid in there working really well, because that's going to bring in and start killing those bugs that we need. So we need this hydrochloric acid to be functioning in our gut to optimize our methylation. So the next thing that we saw in that picture was intrinsic factor. This is another secretion called intrinsic factor. And this is really important because it binds to different dietary sources that we consume of B12. So it's kind of like the catcher and the baseball and the catcher's mitt, that they code together as a team. They just have to sock together. And that where our stomach, our parietal cells pump out this thing called intrinsic factor, which on this image looks like a green crescent shape. The B12 that we consume B12 from our dietary sources. I'm not a huge fan of dairy because it impacts so many people negatively, but think your fish, your meats, all your dietary sources of your B12, and we're not going to create those. We have to get those in, and they have to pair up as a team. So the intrinsic factor has to meet together with that B12, and then they have to travel together down that small intestine in that ileum, and be absorbed there. So we have that B12 absorption, which takes place in the food that we eat, along how our stomach is functioning. And if the stomach's not functioning great, guess what happens to the B12? You think it gets absorbed? Nope, it doesn't. So here we go. Here's bringing back that Seeking Health, wonderful image of Dr. Ben Lynch's here. Where does B12 come into play in this picture? Can you point it out? Have you seen this picture before? And that's okay if you haven't, or if you have and you're an expert. Either way, it is right in the middle, right there. That cobalamin is the fancy word for B12. So cobalamin is B12, and we need that little circle, that gear, just shifting, turning that big wheel. Think of it in gears. So you need that little spinning effect to make that other big methionine wheel spinning along. So B12 is super important for bringing in that folate that we get from our leafy greens, our vegetables, processing through and moving over to detoxification. We need B12. Super important. There's just a big picture of it. But I love the Seeking Health Pathway Planner, because what Dr. Lynch has done is he's put in the purple letters and the orange letters. Purples are things that slow down that enzyme. So think about like the brakes on your car. That's going to slow that circle down. Anything that's in the orange is going to be speeding it up. But we're going to look at different things that can slow things down. And particularly right here, MTR and MTRR, you can see the purples on there is, especially on the MTR, things that slow down or inhibit. Same word here. B12 deficiency. You can see the lack of B12. Heavy metals. So you see the AL. That's a heavy metal. Where do we get metals from? Well, this is a tip I learned that, did you know mercury is, which is Hg right there. It's located in fluorescent bulbs. So don't break those fluorescent bulbs, because man, you can inhale that mercury and it's toxic to our bodies. Immunizations, even with our kids or our adults that we're having, if we're having that aluminum in there, that can really impact our methylation, which is why so many children, I believe, are having more of these reactions, these vaccine reactions, because they're not born with great methylation to begin with. And so that really can slow down the whole process. Also, you can see the ETOH. It stands for heavy drinking. So alcohol consumption. This is why when you drink alcohol, you don't feel great the next morning. Most people don't. If you do, hey, that's great. But we need to optimize the detoxification of that chemical, which is alcohol, and that is a toxin to our body. I had to pull this up here because I saw this just a few weeks ago on a mommy group I'm in on Facebook, because I see this so frequently with vaccine reactions with the kiddos. And this is a woman who is saying, wow, my 18-week-old got some vaccines and she's inconsolable. She's screaming. They're telling me, the docs are telling me to give her Tylenol, but I'm trying all this, and please, give me some, don't judge me for doing this, first of all, but also give me some ideas what's going on here. And so initially, as a parent, you're thinking, because I have kids, I'm thinking, wow, man, that sucks that this happened. But then also my brain goes on as far as thinking, what could we do to help process this better, just with this little girl, or just how can we prepare our bodies for an immunization adjuvant? How can we prepare ourselves to cope with this? Because what this is doing, like we saw in that past slide right there, that aluminum is slowing down all of these different the methylation pathway. So we're going to get into this a little bit more, but these are some things in the red box that I pulled that we can help with the methylation to go, especially with the kiddo. We can bring in phosphatidylcholine, which comes from eggs, especially that orangey center, the yolk, B vitamins, or consuming meat to get in sunflower butter for kids before they get a vaccine reaction, to get the B12 in there, to get the B6, the cysteine, even glutathione support. These are some things that we can bring in to help overcome it. So I want you to start thinking about, how can I bring in just real world examples into this biochemical sheet? And that's what I want to encourage you to do, because case after case that I see with this, we can start applying this in, and it makes sense, which is so awesome. So we're just recapping here with the stomach secretions, looking at hydrochloric acid, the three main function being protein breakdown, pathogen removal, and that stimulation of those juices downstream. And we have the intrinsic factor that pumps out or helps with that B12 absorption. So if we don't have the B12 absorption, if we don't have these pathogen that are removed, guess what's going to happen? Our methylation is going to suck. So we need to support that. So this is just strategy number one to optimize the expression of that MTHFR is we want to encourage the production in your stomach. And the best way is one, just rest and relaxation, sauna, massage, prayer. All of these things are going to be parasympathetic supporting, which is that component of our central nervous system that is just very relaxing. Sauna is a fantastic way to detox, but also stimulate your parasympathetic system. And that is what we need to encourage hydrochloric acid production. Chew your food is also going to help with that. And also you could pop in a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar or some lemon in some water just first thing in the morning when you wake up. Incorporate these real world, just actionable states, actionable items into your daily living, and it should be able to help you. Now, I did recommend a supplement. You could bring in a supplement form of hydrochloric acid with your food. It just depends on what your practitioner is going to recommend for you as well. Here we go. Now we're relaxing. Take a deep breath in and out, and now we're getting some acid flowing in our stomach. There we go. We have to bring in the Tahiti pictures because it is relaxing, right? Who wouldn't want to be there? All right, so let's move into liver and gallbladder function because this is a key one. This is super big. All right, liver, gallbladder, let's talk about it. Here we go. True or false? The liver can regenerate it if it's removed. A section, I should say. Can it? What do you think? True or false? True, it can. I had a patient, this is actually a patient sent this picture to me because he came and saw me because he was cleaning up his liver to donate to his cousin that was getting this fibrotic liver, and she needed a liver transplant. She was dying. She was in her 30s, and he was in his 30s too. And so he was helping her out. But this was amazing because you can see how the left-hand picture is a picture of the section of the liver they cut out and took out. And in that right-hand picture, look at that smooth, silky, shiny liver. That's what a liver should look like. But the part right behind it, you can tell, man, there is just so much going on. So if we take that into context of methylation, thinking of, okay, how good do you think this woman was methylating, even just looking at her liver, especially knowing that 80% of methylation occurs in the liver? That's pretty big. So just bring it back home here. All of this stuff on this piece of paper or on this video image right here, this is happening in the liver constantly, all the time. Regeneration of cells requires massive amounts of methylation. So if you're having an injury that you're recovering from, if you are pregnant, if we're requiring the development of new cells, we require this methylation process to occur. Now our liver weighs about 3 pounds, a healthy liver does. And like we said, that majority of that methylation occurs here. And look at all in that picture, in that image of that liver, all of those blue veins in there, man, all of the blood is being filtered through that liver, which is one of the main functions. So liver filters all of the blood and the debris from the digestive tract in that hepatic portal vein. So if you see that picture over there with the digestive system, all the yellow, that's a vein. Those are veins, I should say, and they are just all the blood from your stomach, think any debris, any just bacterial load that you may have from food poisoning that you may have eaten in the colon, in the small intestine. All of that blood is just going up and it's filtering back up into the liver. So it's like a trash container for the body. Really, it's filtering all of this blood from your digestive tract. So there's 2 types of cells in the liver, main cells. One of them is a hepatocyte, which is a liver cell. This makes bile. Bile is super important, that we're going to get into next. So we need the secretion of bile. We also have these things called Kupffer cells, which act like little Pac-Man. They eat the debris up. So they're just going in there and eating the bad stuff that's filtering up through as those other hepatocytes, which is the majority of the cells in your liver, are just squeezing out this bile that it's making on a daily basis. So here's our trash collector. This is a Kupffer cell. And you can see it's consuming old red blood cells, old white blood cells, the bacteria, toxins, all of the stuff that is hormones that is going through the liver, it's consuming them and phagocytosing it. And then it's kind of just pooping it out. It's just giving that, even has on down there on the bottom, it looks like it's, just bringing it out. So this is where the color of poop comes from, really, that stool, that brown, because you poop out the bilirubin, which is a component of our red blood cells, which makes that color brown. So a little tip there when you're looking at your poo. But this is gallbladder function. So gallbladder stores the bile. So your liver, within the hepatocytes, they're squeezing out this bile. They're flowing down all of these tubes, these tubules down into the gallbladder, and it's storing there. And it's a very concentrated state of bile that's being stored in your gallbladder. If you have one, we're going to get to the point of what if you don't have one here in a minute too. So the gallbladder, here we go. Here's a question. How much bile is produced by your liver daily? What do you think? 3 teaspoons, 1 cup, 3 cups, 1 quart. How much bile is produced? 1 quart. A lot. That's a good amount of bile, of liquid. So when you're thinking of all this juice, man, you got to stay hydrated, right? We got to get that water consumption in our body so all of these cells can do what they're supposed to do. So the gallbladder and the bile, so the function of the gallbladder here is to store and concentrate by 10 times. It's super concentrated until it's needed and squirted out in that small intestine. So think of bile, because remember those Kupffer cells, they're just gobbling up all those toxins, anything that you're being exposed to. Think of just outside, all the sprays, all the chemicals that we're putting on our bodies, the pesticides that we're consuming when we go out to eat and they're just not washing things great, or we're inhaling them. The glyphosate, the Roundup, that they're putting everywhere in, our hormones, estrogen levels, all of these different things, these heavy metals are going through our liver and they're being secreted into the bile. So it's containing, the bile is pretty toxic, but we need to get that stuff out. It acts like a detergent. It's going to break up the fats that are coming out there. So estrogen, mercury, the GMO stuff, all of this is coming out. So it's important that we're getting rid of this of our body. But most all estrogen must be cleared through the liver and the gallbladder. So women who are in different phases of their life cycle, with being premenopausal, if estrogen are rising high, for estrogen dominant, even as a male, men can develop estrogen. So if you're losing weight too, if you're working with me or another practitioner and you're just fat loss, you're just awesome, you're dumping out estrogen that's being stored in those fat cells, is same as toxins. So if you're getting an extra load of estrogen through your body, it's going to be harder on your liver and your gallbladder. So in your thinking hormones, you got to think, man, that's really impacting my gallbladder and my liver. So here's a nice example I put on the upper right or left-hand side there. One of those balls that you squeeze, that feel real funky and gooey and squishy. Think about that. We need to get that gallbladder squeezing as best as it can. So we don't want sticky bile to occur. We don't want these gallstones forming in there. We want it to be nice and fluid so it can constantly be squeezing and pushing out into the small intestine. But some things of the words that I've written on here, these are things that can make bile sticky. So this is slowing down the methylation that we have here. So when methylation is impaired, the phosphatidylcholine is lacking. And we get phosphatidylcholine because it is a component of the dietary eggs that we're eating and other sources that we'll see here. But also it's a methylation product. So we need to get the estrogen controlled. We can't take Tums, because what does Tums do? That's going to shut off the hydrochloric acid. And we need that acid to function to support our B12 absorption. If you're vegan or vegetarian, you're not getting that, especially if you're not supporting it with the right nutrients, especially B12, that can also impair methylation, causing the bile to become sticky. Gut infections man, parasites. We have so many of these things we don't realize we have these going on. H. pylori, all of these things will slow down methylation pregnancy because of higher estrogen, and actually just taxing on the liver in pregnancy is going to slow down methylation. If you've done some genetic testing, if you have a COMT enzyme or gene that is slowed down, so you have the plus, which means a really slow moving COMT gene, that gene is going to process estrogen. So if you know this going in, that you have a gene that is more, it's going to slow things down a little bit, and you're coming near to menopause and you have higher estrogen levels, you're putting yourself, you just know that I have a higher risk for getting sticky bile, and we don't want that. So we want to really support the gallbladder and the liver function as we're working with methylation. So when you have the sticky bile, it makes you for having a higher risk for SIBO, which is a small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, which is bacteria, which is in the colon, creep over and seep over into the small intestine. And it can just grow and just embed itself in places it shouldn't be. So you can have more symptoms of bloating and gas, and man, that can just affect so many other things, even just with our brain function when we have a digestive system that's not working great. Many bugs can stick to the walls of the small intestine if you don't have that real clean bile just rinsing off as it goes, just lining that. So it puts you at a higher risk for having bacterial overload if your gallbladder is not and liver are not functioning great. All right, for those of you who don't have a gallbladder, because I'm sure you might be thinking that, you're having a constant drip of bile that's just constantly being dripped into the small intestine. So it's going to be very diluted. It's not going to be that really concentrated form of bile. So I did not find this in the research as far as it being not as effective, but I'm just using my brain here to think of physiology, what is going on. And if you're not going to have as strong of a detergent, is it going to be as effective as maybe putting in think of it as an analogy of with your washing machine. If you put in a whole scoop of detergent to clean your clothes versus maybe just an eighth of a scoop of detergent, which one do you think is going to clean a little bit better? You want the strong concentrated component. So it probably will put you at a more risk for having bacterial overload with not having a gallbladder. And of course, you might hear that you need the emulsification support just to help break down those fats, because that's a function of that bile, is to break apart and emulsify the fats that are coming, that you're consuming, as well as if you have your own fat out of your body, that you're losing weight with this. So, so that's about. So looking at these two other enzymes or genes called PEMT and BHMT. BHMT is right in the middle of the methionine cycle where homocysteine gets recycled. This is an essential pathway that is, you can see that long curvy arrow that goes down with choline. So choline is needed from our dietary sources, and especially our eggs, our yolks of our eggs. It needs betaine to really help move that through the pathway. Another area on this chart, you'll see PEMT, which is dealing with phosphatidylcholine. And that's at where SAM, it's kind of at the upper right-hand corner where SAM converts into SAW, and we have this production of PEMT. So let's go into those a little bit. These genes make choline phospholipids through that BHMT, as well as the PEMT. I'm just highlighting them here for you that we just addressed on that last slide. So these are going to make choline phospholipids. So choline is necessary, these phospholipids, because they are a bilayer of all of our cell walls. We have lots of cells in our body, and so we need a good, solid foundation to protect all of those intricate, beautiful components of those cells. So we need to have a nice strong cell wall, and that choline is going to help with that. It also helps keep the bile flowing. It keeps it really liquid, flowing through the liver, in, out, through the gallbladder, into the small intestine. So we need a good consumption of choline, and then the conversion of it into that phospholipid component. So it helps protect the body against that hard detergent action of the bile too. So we need the choline. It's a protective mechanism, and it helps just with our body. Now, 15% of pregnant women are deficient in phosphatidylcholine, and this is a statistic that Dr. Lynch just preaches about. And you go into PubMed and you pump in choline deficiency, and there's so many papers out there. They actually had a huge just marketing effort. Even I think it was in Australia, where they pumped out a ton of information saying we have a deficiency here and we need to bring choline back into our body's dietary sources. So the body makes phospholipids from the choline that we're consuming through this process here. So this is just one of the studies that I pulled, that it says that choline intake is 90% of adults don't consume enough of this nutrient. And there's a lot of this out there. So you can go even find this on your own, but we need to support that liver function so the choline can do what it needs to do. And this is just, I pulled this because it's a visual image of some choline that you can obtain. The eggs, the yolks, even lima beans, if you can't do beans or legumes, chicken breast has a little bit, as well as Brussels sprouts. I like the Brussels sprouts, the leafy, dark leafy greens. You're going to get your folate from there too. So bring in those eggs if you can tolerate them, and some of these other things as well. So key strategy number 2 is we got to keep that bile flowing to help move that MTHFR gene as well. You can also take supplement forms of phosphatidylcholine. Bitters are fantastic for getting that bile flowing as well, but we just need to support the production of that gallbladder in the bile. There we go. This is a nice, beautiful fat with some choline in the middle. So this might give you an idea of getting a good blood regulation and getting a good higher fat type of food in there with the egg. Pancreas. Let's move on to the next one here. So the pancreas it's an exocrine and an endocrine, and this is a really funky looking organ that's kind of packaged right behind that stomach in there, and it really does look like a wad of chewed up bubble gum. We had to dissect humans at Logan when I was there for my doctor of chiropractic, and when you see that pancreas, it just looks like a wad of chewing. It's such an intricate looking organ in there, but it has 2 functions, and you can see the purple circles on the top. Those are the digestive enzymes that your pancreas is producing. And so those digestive enzymes are going to go through the pancreas into the body and the head. It's going to secrete itself out into the small intestine to help you digest your food. Now, 1% of the function of the pancreas is going to be endocrine function. So those are going to be looking at the majority is going to have the purple. 99% it's going to pump out those purple circles at the top. The bottom ones are going to be pumping out the green ones. And this is going to be endocrine related. This is the hormones that your pancreas produces, which is the main ones we're going to really touch on is the glucagon and the insulin. Insulin helps get the blood sugar. It gets the glucose into the cell. Glucagon is a hormone that's going to help get it out of the cell to help raise the blood sugar in times of fasting or sleeping at night. So insulin, we want to get that down. And a lot of diabetics might have high blood sugar, and they're regulating that through insulin production and making sure that that's, especially if you are a type 1 or a type 2 diabetic, that is regulated properly through your physician. But we're going to look at the pancreas and what we can do here. So the pancreas also helps with producing lipase. Pancreatic lipase. Lipase helps break down that fat. So the bile is going to kind of come in and emulsify it and break it down into large chunks. Then the pancreas lipase is going to come in there and break it down to even smaller ones. So you can get it absorbed into that tissue, into the small intestine a little bit later on. So they share a duct. They sure do. So the pancreatic and the gallbladder, they share this duct, and they come together and they squeeze out right at that small intestine right there. So I think that's interesting to see that design, how God designed us like that, where they share that duct. So it's digestive enzymes just shifting down into that small intestine. So when we're bringing in some methylation concepts or just genetic components of blood sugar and pancreas is one, the pancreas, we need those digestive enzymes to help break down the food to get the cofactors in. Cofactors are going to be all those little green little words that have an arrow on the blue circle. So you can see, even in this picture, you're going to see the PNMT, there's a little SAM, which is SAM. And even on the COMT, there's SAM and magnesium, Mg. You need those. It's like little, you have to shake in the little ingredient to make it go through into the next step in there. So if you do have blood sugar regulation because your pancreas isn't working optimally, because one, you're totally stressed out and you're eating a ton of sugar, that can impact the COMT and the MAOA genes, which are downstream, and it helps you clear out the epinephrine, the norepinephrine, which is our stress hormones. That's going to help us clear those out. If you're a coffee drinker and you drink and it just gets you going, man, then if you have a COMT enzyme that's not working great, it might, if it's slow, it has the homozygous genetic aspect of that, then you might not be able to clear your coffee very well. So you might be up at night, your head's spinning, you can't go to sleep. So maybe even just taking some magnesium will help clear that. So, and also coffee dehydrates you as well. So we do definitely need to bring in those electrolytes in if we're drinking the coffee for that aspect in there. A little tip. Okay, so as far as optimizing pancreas efficiency, we want to regulate that blood sugar. That's huge when it comes to methylation support. What I recommend is look at what you're eating to begin with. How many carbs, which break down into sugar, how many carbs are you really consuming on a daily basis? We like to suggest using MyFitnessPal because it's free. It's an app you can go download, and you'll see what you're actually putting in your body and how many grams of carbohydrates that you're consuming on a daily basis. If you're consuming, my little tip is if you're consuming 100 grams or more a day of carbohydrates, try cutting it in half. Try cutting it down and see how you feel. But at least maintain a minimum of 60 grams of protein a day for dietary intake. We get a little bit more complex in that when we're working together with macros and ketogenic, or not even ketogenic, just to understand how much the quantity of food that we should be eating. But the biggest thing that we see is that we live in a society where we consume way too much sugar, which is impacting the function of our hormones and impacting our methylation process. I have on my website, enlightenstl.com, some videos on MyFitnessPal. So check it out there if you want to go there and see some of my tutorials on how to open up an account and start tracking. The last one is the small intestine. Okay, so how long do you think your small intestine is? 12 inches, 10 feet, 6 feet, 52 inches. What do you think? What do you think? Ready? Here it is, 10 feet. B, that's filled with blood. If it's not with blood, it's actually 26. It really stretches out. So we need to think in terms of, wow, this is huge. This is long. So when you slice the lining of that small intestine up and open it up, the surface area is going to be equivalent to about 2,700 square feet, which is really the size of a tennis court. That's huge. Think of a tennis court. That's how much absorption your body has the capability to do. So we want to focus on the lining. So if you look over in the left-hand side, you see that circle, that lumen of the small intestine. We're just going to take that one little circular muscle right there and bring it over to the next picture. This is called a villi. And in that villi, we have all these nutritive facts, the blood vessels, the lymph that's removing toxins, that's delivering nutrients to our system. And then if you take one of those villi and pull that open, we can see the very far right-hand side, which is a bunch of, looks like grass, right? Which is called the microvilli. So think of it, I like to use it in terms of grass, right? So we have these long blades of microvilli in there, which is also known as a brush border. That's super important for absorption. At the tips, the very top of all of that, we're going to have our digestive enzymes. that our small intestine produces. So we need to have the digestive enzymes in there. We also have, in between all those little blades of grass, or the microvilli, we have SIGA, which is our immunoglobulin. It's part of our immune system that lives in the lining of our gut. So we need to make sure that we have a nice working digestive small intestine going, because that is going to help you optimize the digestion and the absorption of the nutrients that you're consuming. And this is just talking about the small intestine absorption. If you see that green cofactors component with that arrow, that is going to be necessary to make those genes work on the pathway planner. If you don't have those cofactors on there, do you think the gene's going to work as fast? No. So we got to make sure we're absorbing those cofactors within our body. And we do that through optimizing our small intestine and making sure that that's not shaved down. It's not stress induced. It's not celiac just tearing away. We need to rebuild the lining of that tissue up. And that's what functional medicine does with that. So cofactors are needed to make the genes work. So I listed a few here are just some of the cofactors needed to move those enzymes through the pathway planner. Just from step 1 to step, I don't know how many total steps there are, but there's a lot. Going through the detoxification, molybdenum, heme, iron, zinc, SAM. We need the magnesium, the B6. They're super nutritive cofactors. So we go to the brush border enzymes, and here's just a nice thing that you can introduce is bringing some ginger in, because that's a protease, which is a protein digestion component. That's a cup of ginger isn't necessarily a bad idea after a large meal, or women if you're pregnant or you have that nausea. That's why ginger helps with that nauseousness, because it's going to calm that digestive upset down. So it's going to help you digest your meal more quickly. So you can incorporate that into more dietary components or teas as well. So the last strategy that I have here just to optimize that is we got to get that brush border working good. So consuming ginger, colostrum is another huge component that I use in my practice. Enzyme therapy just to help rebuild that. Some things you can do on your own is bring in the dietary sources of the ginger. And other ones that we mentioned before, the hydrochloric acid, rest and relaxation, apple cider vinegar. We can bring in all the strategy 2 and strategy 3. All of these things can help just moving that methylation process along. So, I just like, if you want something a little bit more customized, I can help you out. My office manager, Deanna, you can call us at 314-812-3800. Check us out online, enlightenstl.com, and follow us. We're social. We're on Facebook, and we are on Instagram. Email us if you have a question, support@enlightenstl. I'm super honored for you to listen to me today. And if you have questions about this, reach out to us. Let us know what things you do have found to be helpful in here. But these are just the main key strategies, dietary-wise, digestive-wise. When we work with MTHFR, we got to start rebuilding the components so we can absorb things better, get the methylation flowing. Instead of just handing you a supplement for you to take, we look at the big picture. I hope you have a great day. Thanks for joining me.